I've been a forest ranger for going on 5 years now. I don't feel it's necessary to disclose my location, so please don't ask me where these take place. With that out of the way, I also want to say that I'm no professional when it comes to the paranormal or creatures. I don't have an explanation for most of the things I went through and experienced. Maybe you all can help me with that. With that said, I'll start with the first encounter I had. While patrolling the forest where I work, we had gotten a call about a possible wanderer. A wanderer is someone who walks off the path and is either lost or up to no good. I can't tell you how many teens think it's cool to go smoke in the woods out here. Anyway, I took the call and started taking the ranger trails so I could find whoever it was. The description they've given me was tall and slender, not much to go off of, but I figured it was better than nothing. I was nearing the end of a specific trail when I heard something off to the east of me. I'd look over in that direction and saw a quick flash of color and ducked behind a tree. I called out, "Hey, you can't be out here, it's for the forest personnel only," and they didn't respond, and then came out, so I started walking over. I was left speechless when I came up beside the tree I'd seen this figure go behind, and there was nothing there. When you're in the woods, it's not really easy to make it out without being heard. I looked all around, but there wasn't a sign of anyone. I walked to meet my superior and let him know. He said to do one more run-through of the area, and if I don't find anything, to report back to him. After my second patrol, I still found nothing, so I did what he asked and reported to him. After he asked what color I saw duck behind the tree, I explained that it looked like someone with a red flannel shirt with blue jeans. He just laughed and said, "That was probably Sebastian." I was lost. What do you mean? Is he just void of punishment? Kind of hard to punish a ghost. I shot him a skeptical look. Sebastian was a young kid who was attacked by a bear out here nearly 15 years ago when I first started. He's never really left. From that day forward, I saw Sebastian a handful of times. I've also seen a few apparitions here and there, the most notable being when I was giving a tour of the campgrounds we have out here. There was a small group of people with me when a woman raised her hand and asked, "Are we allowed over by the river?" She then pointed over to the bank where I saw a woman in a white nightgown. Yes, however, we require that everyone who can't swim or is not an illegal adult to wear a life jacket. You can't swim in it either as the current is very strong. However, the life jackets are a safety precaution. I called out to the woman near the bank, "Ma'am, do you mind joining my group up here? You really shouldn't be down there." Her head turned to face me slowly, and when it did, I felt all the color drained from my face. She didn't have any eyes, they were just black pits. A few of the people in the crowd gasped, and a few kids hugged their parents in fear. I looked back at the group, and they looked at me for an answer, but I didn't have one. When I looked back, the woman was gone. We just continued on with the tour after that, with a palpable awkwardness and uneasiness. When people find out I work where I do, I'm often asked if I believe in Bigfoot. The short answer is no, I don't. My longer answer would be that there are much scarier things out there than Bigfoot. Here's my story of one of them. This will also be my last story, as it may give an idea of the location in my workplace, and I don't want people visiting just because of these stories. That's not a good reason to come out here. The real reason would be to enjoy nature and all it has to offer. With that said, I'll stop beating around the bush. I was doing another patrol when I saw something run out in front of the patrol vehicle. It's really a golf cart. Thinking I had hit a fawn or something similar, I hopped out, radioed in the lead ranger. When he asked for a description, I didn't really know what to say. This thing was about the size of a full-size German Shepherd but was all black and had a shiny coat. The body type was also similar, but there were no ears, and no sign of there even being any there. Also, there wasn't a snout. I don't mean that it was squashed in like an English bulldog, but there wasn't one. The face was flat and pointed with two small slits in the front. The lead ranger showed up soon after. We spoke over the walkies. He was just as confused as I was. The wildlife preserve was called, and they took it with them to get a better idea of what it could be. While they were transporting it, however, some campers got a few pictures of it. These were turned into local news stations, and they ran a piece on it in the newspaper. It never made it to television, thankfully. The last I heard, there have been no new updates about what it could be. When I was 8, my parents put me in the Boy Scouts. Now, despite what you're about to listen to, I still believe it was one of the greatest things I ever did. I loved hanging out in the woods, learning about survival, and all that good stuff. Being that a large part of the courses we took were in the woods and dealt with wildlife, you'd expect me to have at least one spooky story. Well, I can assure you that any Boy Scout has at least one, and this is mine. I'd been in the Boy Scouts for about a year at this point. We were covering something to do with leaves in the woods. I'm not sure what it was, but that's beside the point. Once the lesson was over, we were paired up and told to go out and find the biggest leaf that we could. It sounds silly, but it was a ton of fun. We were instructed not to go out of eyesight of the scout leader, but the kid I was with didn't listen. He kept looking back at the scout leader to see if they were looking away, and as soon as they looked away, he booked it into the forest. Now, we were taught that if you were ever separated from your partner, to blow the whistle they'd given us. That wasn't really going through my head, though. I stupidly gave chase, calling out, "We're not allowed to go out there." He just kept running. Eventually, he stopped and turned to look at me. He had been a few years older than me, maybe 10. So when I saw that he had a cigarette in his mouth, I wasn't surprised. My parents did that at the time too, so I figured it was something adults and older kids do. "We need to go back," I said. "I can't see the scout leader." He just laughed and took a drag from the cigarette. "Fine," I said, "I'll just get their attention." I reached for my whistle, but when I pulled it out, he knocked it out of my hand. "You better not get me in trouble, or I'll beat you up." I took this seriously. I wasn't the biggest kid, and being that he was older than me, I assumed he was stronger. He was laughing for a little before he looked behind me, and that's when his face went white. I figured the scout leader had found us, but it was so much worse. He dropped the cigarette butt and booked it back towards the scout leaders. I ran over and stomped it out. When I turned around to leave, though, I saw what it was that scared him so badly. For lack of a better word, it was Bigfoot. It was tall, hairy, and smelled like absolute death. The fur on its face and around its hands were matted with what I assumed was animal blood. I legitimately peed myself then and there. It wasn't moving, so I tried to fight all my logical thinking and ran over to the whistle that was on the ground. I made it to it and blew it as hard as I could. I'm lucky this thing was slow because it could have taken my head off. The whistle sounded, and the creature cried out before running off into the woods. Soon after, I was scooped up by a scout leader, and we were all back at the Boy Scout camp. The leaders gave us a long and stern talking to about forest safety. One thing I remember vividly is when he said, "There are some things out there that will hurt you." It seemed like such a terrible thing to say to a child, but I knew he was right. We still went out to those woods after that, but I never saw anything like it again. I'm not really sure how to start this. I suppose I just say it. I saw something in the woods. It wasn't a bear or Bigfoot. Everyone knows that's nonsense. On top of that, there will be things I mentioned later that will disprove that theory, so people listen. I was on my way through Iowa, backpacking through an old hiking trail here in town when I came across an abandoned campsite off one of the trails. Now, normally, I would leave that kind of thing alone and let those who clean up the trail deal with it. I don't want to be accused of meddling with someone else's things. This was different, however. It wasn't just abandoned, it was trashed. It didn't look like someone simply left it there, it was like someone was attacked. The tent had been pulled off from the ground and flipped completely over, the food was strewn about, and there were embers of the fire all around the site, still burning. That's what caused me to walk over there. I didn't want one of them to catch a strong wind and send the whole forest into flames. I made my way over and took my time to stomp out all of the embers. I then checked the vicinity around the campsite to see if there was anyone near who may have been staying out here. I went off into the woods, calling out for anyone. That was my mistake. I was maybe 20 feet in when I heard it. It was a low, guttural kind of growl coming from deep within the woods. It was like something I had never heard. It wasn't like a large dog, but at the same time, it wasn't like a bear's roar. I wasn't sure what I was getting into. I thought about heading back, but at the same time, I wanted to find out if there was someone out there who had to go through that. I would have tried to help them out. As I kept walking, the ground began to grow closer. I kept an eye and an ear out for it, but it was nearly impossible to pinpoint. Eventually, I decided that the person must have left their things there, and something came by and tried to snatch it all up and search for food. That didn't answer all of my questions, though. Most all wild animals were afraid of fire. How then was it scattered about like someone had kicked it? I decided this was getting a little too spooky for me, so I started back to the campsite. I didn't pick up on it at the time, but when I was heading back, the growling had subsided. It wasn't until I made it back that I heard it again and what was causing it. I stayed at the tree line, hoping this thing wouldn't see me. It was massive, imagine a bear standing on its hind legs, only totally hairless. This is why it couldn't have been a bear. I'm fairly certain that they don't shed all their fur. Also, this thing was walking, albeit awkwardly. It lumbered around the campsite for a while, searching for more food, I suppose. When it didn't find anything, it lumbered slowly back into the forest. I left and went back home soon after that. I did some research, and I can't seem to find anything that matched this thing's description. I'm not sure if anyone knows what it was. I try to give a more detailed description, but pulling from memory here. It was definitely the size of a bear. Also, it had to be an animal, and in no way was it human. It wasn't clothed, then, I didn't see any human genitalia or any at all for that matter. There were small round ears fixed atop its head and a large long snout on its face. If anyone can help me identify this thing, I'd greatly appreciate it. It's been stuck in my mind for a while, and I've just never looked for answers this way through fear of ridicule. Please, guys, what was that thing? Every town has its urban legends, and mine was no exception. Ours was about the child snatcher. It's not totally original, I know, but what are you gonna do? Nearly everything is a remix at this point anyway. The cool thing about this legend is that there was a location behind it. The story goes like this: there was a man who lived in my town in the 1920s. He was found guilty of 6 counts of child abduction, child endangerment, and worse. Before he was hanged, he swore that he would always be here, stalking the woods for any children that strayed out of the boundaries their parents set. No parents tell their little boys and girls not to play in the woods because the child snatcher will get them. I believe that when I was a kid, a lot of us did. However, as I grew older, I knew it was total hoopla. There was no way someone from the 20s was hanging out in the woods. The legend lived on, though. One of the kids in our town went missing a few years back. He still has not been found. However, his shoe was found in an abandoned sewer tunnel in the woods. That sewer tunnel was only about a mile from my house. I had ventured out there multiple times, using it as a checkpoint and meeting place with my friends. We talked about venturing down there multiple times but never did. We'd open it up, get one good look from the top, and close it back up. A few weeks back, I decided to quit beating around the bush and just go down there. Obviously, no one living down there would be nearly impossible. All my friends were busy doing something much more important, so I set on this quest alone. It was maybe 6 p.m. when I arrived at the sewer tunnel. A little elbow grease, and the cover was off. I slowly made my way down the ladder and was soon in the tunnel. It didn't smell as bad as I remembered, but it was spooky. I turned on my flashlight and headed down, looking for any sign that someone was living down there. I had been walking for about 10 minutes and had only seen a few rats, nothing paranormal or monstrous. I was ready to turn back and go home when I heard it. It was definitely something else in there with me. I could hear someone walking around and even saw another light source approaching from the opposite end of the tunnel. I shone my light down there, calling out, "Hey, is anyone there?" At first, I didn't see anything. The flashlight I had wasn't the most powerful. The footsteps got closer, and the light grew brighter. I called out again, "Hey, who's there?" The footsteps stopped. I shone my light toward them, and finally, I was able to make it out. There was a man standing in the tunnel with a broken neck. The light he had was that of an old lantern. I nearly fell down trying to get out of there and made it to the ladder, climbing up quickly and putting the manhole cover over as fast as I could. I fell over backward and just looked at the entrance for a while. I ran through every scenario in my head. Maybe someone was just playing a prank. My friends knew I was gonna be down there. But how long would they have stayed down there? That could have taken a ton of time to plan as well. It was also the thought that it could have just been a ghost. I didn't want to believe it, but it all added up: the broken neck, the location, the lamp. It all made sense. Like I said at the beginning, every town has an urban legend. I just didn't expect to find out mine was real.